This is Ötzi, the Iceman, one of the oldest and best preserved intact human bodies ever found.
He's the oldest human specimen we have that is so complete, so well preserved.
For more than 5 millennia, a lifeless form remained dormant under the surface of long-vanished ice until the melting of the glaciers revealed its hidden presence. It was something far older and much weirder than what first seemed like a terrible climbing disaster. A shocking new piece of information regarding his life and death was revealed in 2025 when the last piece of this frozen puzzle was discovered. Something that had been plainly obvious for some time was finally brought to light by his possessions, wounds, and peculiar skin tattoos. However, there was one aspect that stuck out and brought up fresh concerns. In his last hours, what precisely transpired? Who cares about it now, anyway? 2 German hikers were shocked to see a human torso sticking out of the ice as they traversed a glacier in the Ötztal Alps in the fall of 1991, close to the Austrian-Italian border. It appeared like a recent climbing catastrophe because, to the high-altitude environment, melting snow, and the fact that it was more than 3,200 meters above sea level. After the call to authorities, the situation was initially treated like any other modern crime scene in an effort to recover the corpse. The odd state of the body and the weird artifacts around caused investigators to rapidly dispel that supposition. It became apparent that the recently deceased was not your average accident victim, and the corpse was given the name Ötzi in honor of the nearby mountain range. The preservation of his skin, hair, organs, and even his final meal had been accomplished by freeze-drying thousands of years ago. Ötzi remained undamaged and unfossilized, unlike the majority of prehistoric artifacts. He defied expectations of preservation and was practically frozen in time, like a natural mummy. His death was estimated to have occurred approximately 3250 BCE, according to radiocarbon dating. This makes him the oldest intact mummy ever found in Europe, and his age exceeds 5,000 years. Originally, Ötzi was thought to be roughly 4,000 years old by archaeologist Konrad Spindler, based on the type of artifacts discovered near his remains. More exact scientific measurements, however, demonstrated that the Iceman really predated that by almost 1,000 years. A copper axe and flint tools, relics from the early Copper Age, when metallurgy began to radically alter civilization, were among the priceless gems hidden in his material wealth. Researchers were only able to place him in a small window of European antiquity based on his age and the artifacts he carried. What seemed like the first sign of a seemingly undamaged burial was actually something far more complex. Researchers studying the moss and plants from the gully where Ötzi was discovered found evidence of 3 refreezings of the ice over a period of hundreds of years. It has been demonstrated in this instance that glaciers do not always freeze solid. However, as a result of climatic changes, old artifacts might be uncovered and then reburied. Thanks to Ötzi's unspoken testimony about the past, a brand new discipline known as glacial archaeology was born out of this discovery. It wasn't only his advanced age that shocked experts. It was the absolute stillness he had maintained throughout the years. Environmental factors alone preserved Ötzi's body in remarkable detail, making his preservation a unique instance of natural mummification. The body of Ötzi was subjected to a distinct freeze-drying process due to the severe cold, low humidity, and periodic exposure in the high alpine gully where he passed away, as opposed to conventional burial or deliberate mummification. His skin, tissues, and even stomach contents have stayed almost unchanged from the day of his death more than 5,000 years ago. Yet his body was not embalmed, wrapped, or altered in any way. As a spiritual and ceremonial activity, however, The ancient Egyptians refined the skill of artificial mummification. The procedure included cutting out the organs, exposing the corpse to natron salt to dehydrate it, and then covering it with resins and linen to seal it. The preservation of Egyptian mummies was done on purpose, for religious purposes, with the goal of ensuring the soul's journey to the afterlife. This lengthy and complex ceremony was performed only by the most esteemed members of Egyptian society and had profound symbolic meaning as it highlighted their faith in an afterlife. The preservation outcomes that have resulted from these various techniques are quite variable. Although Egyptian mummies are often in good condition, they may have hollowed out organs and dried out tissues due to embalming or the passage of time. Researchers have been able to do genetic tests, scan Utsi's arteries, locate tattoos, and examine his final meal with a level of accuracy rarely seen in ancient human remains, since Utsi has preserved his organs, muscle tissues, and, in certain cases, skin coloration. Scientists' perspectives on preservation and the capacity of the natural environment to preserve evidence of the past have been shaped by the differences between Utsi and Egyptian mummies. The only reason Utsi's body survived was because of nature, even though it was never meant to. The natural preservation of Utsi's body makes it a genuine scientific time capsule, in contrast to the Egyptian mummies, which are all about symbolic and ceremonial preservation. It sheds light on prehistoric European health, everyday living, and death without the ritualistic complexities of purposeful mummification. The burial place of Utsi not only contained the remains of an old man, but it also maintained all of his equipment, personal belongings, and tools, providing insight into the lifestyle of a Copper Age nomad. His copper-bladed axe was one of the most interesting things. The fact that Utsi's tool, which was made of almost pure copper and attached to a wooden handle with birch tar, demonstrated that he lived during a technological transition when people started utilizing metal tools instead of stone ones. The presence of such a high-quality artifact hinted at Utsi's potential position within his society by suggesting his ability and prestige. Archaeologists found a quiver with 14 arrows and a half-built longbow beside his corpse. Some of the arrows had fletching and flint heads, while the others were unfinished. This combination points to his being ready to equip himself with new tools, maybe for an upcoming hunt or battle. Crafted with sharp stone tips and tied with natural sinew, the arrows were a perfect complement to the yew bow, an exceptionally sturdy and pliable wood for archery. Weapons like this weren't for show. They were practical means of subsistence and protection. A tiny flint dagger in a wooden sheath, a leather bag with many pockets for a scraper and an awl, and a piece of what may have been a backpack's wooden frame were all part of the set. Additionally, a fragment of birch fungus, perhaps intended for therapeutic purposes, sheds light on the mental processes of the Copper Age people. These artifacts, when viewed collectively, reveal a person who was well prepared for hunting or travel in a hilly region. They imply that Utsi was probably on a mission, whether it was to escape or get ready for a fight, rather than simply aimlessly meandering. His high-tech equipment casts doubt on long-held beliefs about ancient technology. Indeed, people had previously created extraordinarily complex and multi-purpose toolkits tailored to their own needs and surroundings as early as 5,000 years ago. In the initial stages of Utsi's recovery, experts held the belief that he succumbed to hypothermia during an abrupt alpine storm. The sheer height and secluded location of his last resting place lend credence to this first notion. Conrad Spindler, an archaeologist, proposed the theory that Utsi had frozen to death after collapsing in the gully due to extreme fatigue after escaping a violent confrontation. Broken arrows and an incomplete bow, which indicated a rapid retreat from lower heights, provided evidence supporting this view. The concept of a quiet, cold-induced death, however, would soon be disproven by emerging forensic tools. A 13mm arrowhead wedged between Ötzi's left shoulder blade and rib cage was uncovered in 2001 by X-ray imaging, providing a little but crucial hint. The prior examinations probably missed the fact that the arrow's wooden shaft had broken off. A closer look at the tissue showed that the arrow had penetrated his back and was still not healing, suggesting that the damage was recent and lethal. Now it was clear that abrupt and intense trauma was the real killer, and the weather had no more of a role. Additional evidence was supplied by CT scans. Ötzi had quick internal bleeding as the arrow penetrated his subclavian artery. This finding was backed by the discovery of fibrin, a protein that is present at wound sites right away and then vanishes long after. The fact that fibrin is present implies that Ötzi's body started responding to the trauma, but was unable to finish the clotting process, leading to his near instantaneous death. The narrative of Ötzi went from a tragic accident to a case of intentional murder as a result of the evidence. More information is provided by the wounds. A serious cut to the hand, received probably few days before death, fits the description of a defensive wound. His dying hours were dramatic and humanized by the fact that an arrow killed him. Thus, there had to have been fighting just before it did. Instead of passing away calmly in the snow, Ötzi's last minutes were filled with aggression, despair, and movement, an unsuccessful attempt at escaping. As a result of recent forensic discoveries, Ötzi is now being recast not just as a historical character, but also as a victim in one of the longest-running, unresolved murder cases in recorded history. The investigation of Ötzi's DNA has changed our perception of ancient European populations, and the preserved tissues provided a unique opportunity to examine the genetic composition of a prehistoric person. His DNA was initially sequenced in 2012, and scientists then concluded that he shared a strong genetic relationship with contemporary Sardinians. Scientists speculated that Ötzi's family could have influenced early European farming groups after migrating from the Mediterranean. This theory informed the South Tyrol Museum's recreation of his likeness, which depicts him as having light complexion and graying hair that falls to his shoulders. Better sequencing methods 10 years later corrected past misunderstandings by providing a more precise genetic profile. As it turned out, contemporary human interaction had probably corrupted the initial DNA sample. Scientists found that Ötzi belonged to ancient Anatolian farmers who had moved from what is now the Asian section of Turkey when they used next-generation sequencing to re-examine uncontaminated samples. Through migration and cultural interchange, these early agricultural groups greatly influenced the Neolithic population of Europe. As a result, Ötzi is positioned within a larger story of migration that links the Near East to the early colonization of Europe through his family tree. The present DNA study also shed light on the physical makeup and biological traits of Ötzi. His dark, bronzed complexion and hereditary predisposition to early hair loss, similar to male pattern baldness, are hinted at by the real lines, which differ from previous reconstructions. The scant hair, rather than shoulder length, was likely his natural hair texture. Similarly, the skin tone was not artificially lightened by continuous freeze-drying, but rather his actual complexion. These findings shed light on the Copper Age and helped to dispel prehistoric European clichés in art. His health was further illuminated by Ötzi's DNA. Dietary or circulatory problems may have been identified by genetic markers for lactose intolerance and cardiovascular disease. Even more astonishing was the fact that he was the first known human carrier of Borrelia burgdorferi, the bacterium that causes Lyme disease. This proof that Ötzi's remains are more than just a time capsule, they constitute a biological repository of prehistoric life, give scientists a thorough understanding of the ancient human situation through these genetic remnants of diseases, physical tendencies, and hereditary characteristics. Because post-mortem glacial pressure pushed Ötzi's stomach behind his ribcage, its preservation was first disregarded. But knowing its identity added an additional layer to researching ancient food. His well-rounded Last Supper, which included ibex meat, red deer, and einkorn wheat, an ancient grain grown in early agricultural communities, was revealed by scientists who investigated his stomach and intestines. Ötzi had access to fire and the instruments needed for food preparation even when traveling, as evidenced by charcoal traces, which showed the meat was prepared, maybe smoked over an open flame. The microscopic examination of Ötzi's intestines revealed details about his activities just before he passed away. In addition to his diet, he traveled quickly across different heights, according to pollen and spores discovered at different stages of digestion. For instance, plants. Spores that he swallowed later showed that he hiked back up to the alpine zone where he died, while pine pollen that was detected deep in his digestive tract indicated that he ate at a lower, wooded zone. This abrupt shift in height was consistent with other signs that travel was necessary, such as evasion of danger or search for safety. Evidence also suggests that these remnants caused serious health issues. He was afflicted with whipworms, a parasitic illness that is notorious for producing inflammatory bowel symptoms. In addition, the identification of Helicobacter pylori, a stomach cancer-causing microbe, provides proof of early chronic infection, which in turn indicates ulcers. The proteins related with immunological response to H. The presence of pylori bacteria indicates that he may have suffered from gastrointestinal pain or distress in the days leading up to his death. Just goes to show that not even the healthiest of archaic diets could keep the illness at bay. A person's nutrition and health during the Copper Age can be better understood with this information. Infectious diseases, more than 5,000 years ago, demonstrated the limitations of medical knowledge, and these meals demonstrated his attempts to strike a balance between farming and hunting. Not only does Ötzi's corpse reveal how individuals subsisted, but it also provides insight into their interactions with everyday circumstances, which might have influenced their last days. The food habits of Ötzi can also provide light on the wider cultural and environmental changes that were happening during his time. The inclusion of grains and wild animals in his diet reflects a time in human history when people began to settle down and cultivate instead of living as complete nomads. Copper Age communities used seasonal movement to maximize food source exploitation. Similar archaeological evidence for mixed subsistence tactics has been found in neighboring alpine sites. Not only did he have nutritional awareness, but he also adapted to the cold altitude climate, which required energy-dense diet, as evidenced by the occasional addition of high-fat ibex meat to his Last Supper. The 61 tattoos that Ötzi had, which were created with charcoal and tiny incisions, are one of the most impressive aspects of his preserved physique. The tattoos are basic geometric designs. The marks on Ötzi are located in areas that are usually concealed under clothing, in contrast to current tattoos that are usually done for personal or aesthetic reasons. The majority of lesions, which include clusters of dashes, crosses, and straight lines, are located on the spine, ankles, wrists, and knees, all of which have demonstrated symptoms of degenerative joint disease or physical strain. The possible association with early medicinal procedures is what makes these tattoos particularly intriguing. Many tattooed places matched up with arthritis-stricken joints, according to X-ray imaging. Thus, researchers speculated that the tattoos could have had a therapeutic purpose. According to some researchers, these marks may have been an early attempt at acupuncture or pain management, a practice that involves applying pressure to certain places on the body in order to alleviate persistent pain. The intentional location of the tattoos implies that Ötzi was treated, even though no needles or other medical tools were discovered with him. The pigment would dry and endure for millennia after being rubbed into fine incisions with coal. The method was straightforward. Even though it was very different from modern tattooing, it showed that people understood how to make permanent marks on the body with easily accessible natural materials. Tattoos like this are more than just body art. The placement and repetition of the designs suggest an unusual kind of information transmission, one that is based on personal experience rather than on established scientific consensus. One of the first types of body-enabled medical intervention could have been tattoos. These marks may have been part of functional pain remedies, symbolic practices, or healing rituals, indicating a civilization that had a deep connection to the physical. Many find Ötzi's tattoos fascinating because they bring to mind traditional tattooing techniques of other cultures, like the Inuit of the Arctic and the Ainu of Japan. In these cultures, hand-poked tattoos served multiple purposes, including identifying individuals, marking social status, and even curing certain illnesses. Tattoos in ancient societies often functioned as symbolic, spiritual, and medical tools, remarked anthropologist Lars Krutak. This broader anthropological perspective suggests that Ötzi's tattoos are a component of a broader human heritage, where the body acted as both a canvas and a remedy. Advanced forensic science was essential in deciphering Ötzi's account. Radiocarbon dating, which tracks the rate of decay of carbon-14 isotopes in organic matter, was an early and important method. Thanks to this technique, scientists were able to pinpoint the exact age of Ötzi's bones. The ratio of carbon-14 to stable carbon-12 in Ötzi's tissues, along with the known rate of carbon-14 decay, with a half-life of 5,130 years, allowed for the confirmation that he died approximately 3250 BCE, putting him in the early Copper Age. Scientists proceeded by using DNA sequencing to find his genetic code. The first step was polymerase chain reaction, PCR, which is a method for making millions of copies of a little quantity of ancient DNA. The DNA of Ötzi was painstakingly recovered from samples of bone and tissue, despite the fact that it had deteriorated over time. Isolating and multiplying certain sequences of interest became achievable with PCR, allowing for additional study from fragments that would have been illegible previously, no matter how little. After that, the amplified DNA fragments were subjected to Sanger sequencing, which involved the use of fluorescent markers to determine the order of base pairs, adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. In order to selectively truncate DNA strands at certain locations, modified nucleotide ddNTPs were used during the PCR process. A capillary gel electrophoresis method, which uses an electric current to draw DNA through a gel, was used to segregate the resultant fragments by size. A very clear Ötzi genome was pieced together by scientists using the movement pattern and fluorescence. Both Ötzi's case and archaeological research in general have been transformed by these modern instruments. Radiocarbon dating confirmed when Ötzi lived, while DNA sequencing uncovered his family tree, physical traits, food, and health issues. Working in tandem, they transformed a lifeless body into a live database that can be used to investigate health, migration, and genetics in the ancient world. We are starting to find answers to some of humanity's oldest issues through the Ötzi case, which shows how conventional archaeology and current molecular biology work together. Consumer ancestry kits and contentious medical diagnoses now have access to forensic capabilities formerly reserved for elite scientific laboratories due to the declining cost of DNA sequencing. Genome sequencing came before it, showing how genetic information may be used to piece together a person's past and identity. The discovery of Ötzi demonstrated the power of DNA to communicate with the dead and reveal hidden stories within our cells, stated Dr. Albert Zink, director of Italy's Institute for Mummy Studies. Ötzi's story exemplifies how ancient DNA may bridge the gap between the past and the present, providing insights into health, genealogy, and identity, while also posing concerns to the scientific community. In addition to rewriting ancient history, Ötzi's finding ignited a brand new scientific field: glacial archaeology. Few scientists gave glaciers much of a chance to keep artifacts and human remains in such exceptional condition until 1991. The discovery of Ötzi's naturally freeze-dried remains, in conjunction with the organic materials and artifacts found nearby, led researchers to realize the possibilities hidden beneath the ice. His research demonstrated that glaciers were more than destructive monsters. They were also icy safe havens that preserved parts of human history. Because of this insight, researchers began to examine mountainous and Arctic locations in a new light. They stopped seeing these places as desolate wasteland and started looking at receding glaciers as potential archaeological digs. Researchers made a significant discovery when they radiocarbon-dated moss and leaves discovered in the same ravine as Ötzi. The sediments that were laid down over many years proved that the glacier had melted and refrozen several times, casting doubt on the idea that Ötzi had been kept permanently covered in ice ever since he died. Dynamic ice environments, whereby ancient items might be revealed, lost, or re-encased over centuries, were presented by this finding. Ever since then, archaeologists specializing in glaciers have found an ever-increasing variety of artifacts in melting ice fields throughout the globe. Artifacts including wooden implements, leather clothing, and even fossilized human bones have been unearthed from melting glaciers in the Alps, the Yukon, in Canada, and Norway. These artifacts shed light on the daily lives of people whose civilizations have left behind very few conventional archaeological artifacts. Glacial archaeologists have a pressing need to record and protect these artifacts before they deteriorate in the open air as a result of rising temperatures. Anthropologists, meteorologists, and climatologists have all been inspired to work together by the field of glacial archaeology. More than just specialized, cognitively limited groups are now getting the attention they deserve. Thanks to individuals like Andreas Putzer, a conservator at the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology, who organize teams of energetic high country scouts that spend summers looking for signs of early human settlements. Sites close to vegetation, water supplies, and shelters that may have sustained life thousands of years ago are the focus of these planned trips. If Ötzi hadn't been found, this multidisciplinary method of studying ice archaeology might never have been implemented. He unwittingly paved the way for a new era of historical research and caused a sensation in the scholarly community. Learning isn't the only thing that glacial archaeology does. It also alters the way indigenous people and the general public relate to their own history. Artifacts linked to the hunter-gatherers of the current First Nations have been unearthed in the Yukon Territory as a result of the melting ice. As part of these programs, members of the Champagne and Aishihik First Nations collaborate with archaeologists to recover, analyze, and preserve artifacts. "Those aren't just archaeological finds," said Geraldine Charlie, a cultural heritage worker at the Yukon. "According to the participants, they're part of our story, tools from our ancestors, our reminder of how we lived on the land." This partnership demonstrates the need for glacial archaeology to hold living cultures morally responsible while working with ancient artifacts. The more truths that come to light from the ice, the more disturbing the new world becomes. A new chapter in archaeological research was opened with the discovery of Ötzi, but an even more pressing and significant phenomena was hinted at by it: the way climate change is both revealing and jeopardizing the ancient past. Glaciers are melting at record speeds due to the increase in global temperatures, which is exposing artifacts that have been concealed for thousands of years. Artifacts like clothes, bones, and plants, as well as equipment used in hunting, have been kept in environments that were previously conducive to long-term existence but are now becoming more unsustainable. Seasonal thawing has been happening for millennia, even in the high Alps, according to one of the most important scientific discoveries made by Ötzi. Vegetation radiocarbon dating at the site has proven that the ice had reformed many times, enabling organic material to move, settle, or even resurface. However, the current warming trend is distinct. It is more rapid, intense, and pervasive, and it poses a significant threat to the delicate remains of ancient life. When objects emerge from melting ice, they are frequently exposed to air, sunshine, and microbes for the first time in centuries, which speeds up their decay. Now is the moment for scientists and conservation teams to act quickly. Discoveries abound in glacial archaeology, but the time window for securely retrieving and analyzing these artifacts is getting shorter by the day. Before enough recording can be done, entire historical ecosystems may vanish. Archaeologists have thus focused on melt zones that they have determined to be both highly risky and very lucrative. Using satellite imagery, climate models, and drone surveys, they anticipate the potential locations of future major events and swiftly mobilize in response to any reports. Beyond archaeology, the consequences are far-reaching. No matter how little, every piece of clothing, seed, or microbe may tell us something about the climate, farming practices, and health of a bygone era. The discovery of Ötzi demonstrates that these artifacts serve as both cultural treasures and climatic data. As the globe's glaciers melt, scientists face an urgent question: how much of this ancient world can we save, study, and display before it disappears forever? Near the Lenbreen ice patch, Norse glacial archaeology crews found a wool garment in 2017. The outfit was dated to 1,700 years ago. The garment, which had been preserved in the ice, was thought to have been abandoned or lost by an ancient traveler who had traversed the mountain pass. Lars Pilø, who is both an artifact and a frozen moment in time, states as much in his commentary on the Norwegian Secrets of the Ice project. The discovery of these artifacts has ignited new discussions about ethics, with some asking whether they should be preserved in museums or returned to their rightful homes. A long-standing dilemma, the necessity to either preserve or intervene in the melting glaciers and the subsequent exposure of the world's most magnificent treasures, raises the question of how to balance scientific inquiry with the constraints of climate change. Much obliged for your time. Make sure to hit that like button, share your favorite hypothesis in the comment section, and subscribe for more mind-blowing ancient mysteries and scientific discoveries if you were captivated by Ötzi's narrative as we were. Curious to delve further? If you want to see more jaw-dropping findings, just click the next video. Coming right up.